something that was a real unlock for us is the Fin Flywheel. And what we figured out is what is the right workflow for the owner of Fin or an owner of a support agent, and helping them really understand, okay, how do I train this agent? And then once I've done that, how do I test the different training mechanisms that I'm using? And having a really strong product narrative and that flywheel for customers has enabled them to also get success on their own too. More and more, as we're actually selling this solution to the market, we're finding that customers want both. They might start wanting Fin, they end up as Intercom platform customers, and they're still interested in the help desk. We did not just automatically land on outcome-based pricing. In early 2023, when we first launched Fin, customers were hesitant with this technology. And so for us, we had the confidence that this was going to work.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Future Proof. Today, I sit down with Christine Zdelar, who's the Director of Product at Intercom, working on Fin, which is their AI agent. We talk about all the things that Intercom has done to make Fin production ready, even for customers who may be hesitant to adopt AI. We talk about some of the decisions that they've made around connecting knowledge connectors, different help desks to Fin as well, and their decisions to train their own models. So this is a really exciting one. Hope you find this helpful, and stay tuned. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Future Proof. I'm here with Christine Zdelar. She's the Director of Product at Intercom, leading the Fin AI team. So Christine, welcome to the podcast. So there's so many areas I want to cover today about the nuts and bolts of what makes Fin such a great and production-ready agent, and really what has become a very competitive category of support agents. And I'm curious if there is a specific product strategy or approach that anchored your team throughout that building process to get to where Fin is today.
A little bit of context. We launched the first iteration of Fin back in May 2023. I think that was right about the time GPT-4 came out, and I want to say we were like the first agent in production with GPT-4, or if not, one of the very first ones. So we've been at this in what I guess is a long time in this world. Now, Fin has evolved a lot over the last 2.5 years, but when I think of production ready from a product standpoint and what the team has built and getting customers to the level of success that they're at now, I think something that was a real unlock for us is something that we call the Fin Flywheel. So we'll talk about like the app layer, the AI layer, and models probably throughout today, but thinking about like success at the app layer. Something that we introduced last year was this concept of the flywheel. And I think what we figured out is what is the right workflow for the owner of Fin or an owner of a support agent, and helping them really understand, okay, how do I train this agent? And then once I've done that, how do I test the different like training mechanisms that I'm using? How do I test the content or the guidance or the data connectors that I've set up for Fin? And then once I have tested and I feel confident, then once I actually deploy those changes across different channels, then how do I come back and analyze all of those changes I've just made and understand where are there more opportunities or maybe where something still isn't quite working? And I think having a really strong product narrative and that flywheel for customers has really helped them, or has enabled them to also get success on their own too. And so I feel like, at least in the last year, that's been a really big unlock for us.
Yeah, that's huge. And love that you call it a flywheel, because I think there's definitely that type of effect that can happen when the inputs from the customer and someone who's training this agent are stronger. They're more effective, they're more personalized to that use case. So yeah, that is super important. And super interesting that Intercom was one of the first live in production with GPT-4. I think it also came out that you introduced MCP pretty early on as well. Like you embraced and adopted MCP like pretty soon after the specs were released. And a lot of people were hesitant to adopt MCP because it was this bleeding edge thing. But I'm curious, from what you've seen in production, is it ready? Are people adopting it? And what kind of interesting limitations or edge cases have you run into that?
We have customers who are using the MCP. I'll stick with the use case of using like the Intercom MCP and hooking that up to ChatGPT. And so they're doing things like querying their Intercom data or asking or querying like reporting type questions of how many new conversations were started yesterday, what is my resolution rate for this specific topic, things like that. And maybe this is my unsophisticated way of thinking about MCP, but like I think it's more interesting to think about maybe some of the risks and limitations, not that MCP is the technology itself introduces, but what does it mean that we're giving this generative technology read access to these external systems or write access to these external systems? And what is the level of oversight that we need to give there? So when I think about, let's say, readiness around MCP or certainly enterprise readiness, I think the more interesting question is like, what happens when there's unfettered access to these systems and maybe we still don't really know what the right level of oversight is? I can imagine if you're using an MCP with ChatGPT and you're like an HR manager or just like a people manager, and all of a sudden there's that connection and this generative technology has the ability to like approve holiday for everyone, and you're doing that outside of like your normal HR system. So to me, the whole oversight and access questions and risks that it raises, I think, are interesting. I don't think that we're using, like, let's say MCP at scale where we've encountered a lot of this, but we're gonna have to grapple with that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's something that we see at Paragon a lot. It's people needing to essentially implement permission layers on top
Exactly.
of
I think
both
those-
APIs and MCPs, and in ways that
Exactly, yeah.
people maybe weren't anticipating. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and I also think it's pretty interesting that people are kind of using Intercom's MCP like in different maybe chat apps or platforms. And I think that's also an approach that you invested in early on, is deciding that Intercom can live in whatever help desk or whatever tools that you might already be working on. I'm curious what the strategy was behind that. Is that meant to help be an on-ramp to the Intercom ecosystem generally, or is that kind of a general approach that you want to take, that Fin is just this independent agent that can live across any platform?
I think in that decision to allow Fin to sit on top of any help desk, not just Intercom, there are a few market dynamics at play behind this decision that I think like certainly exist in the customer support category that we play in. The first is that I think we should think of there being two camps in the customer support space. So we have the legacy incumbents. They've been around a long time. They have built help desks, and I think in many ways are trying to play catch up when it comes to building out AI agents as part of their platforms. Then, of course, we have all of these AI native challengers who are building, let's say, AI agent point solutions, to describe it simply. Intercom and Fin fall somewhere between the two, and we're in like an interesting and I think unique strategic place in the sense that we obviously have Fin, best performing AI agent, but we also have Intercom, the help desk product that's been around for almost 14 years. Like, it's successful, really successful, and has over 25,000 customers. But we were the first to market with Fin. So we're not really one of the incumbents that maybe have taken a bit of time to come around to this, but we're also not this like brand new AI native challenger who doesn't have a help desk product. So that's one interesting place that we find ourselves in. But I think the other thing that's important to know about the customer support space is that getting customers to switch help desk products is very hard. Even if they hate the tool that they're already using, just like the switching cost, the emotional cost of trying to move your entire support team to something else, it's really risky, and it's like hard to convince customers or the market to do that. But if we were to only limit like our Fin addressable market to existing customers, like I think we're really doing ourselves a disservice and the market a disservice. And if there are no real technical limitations to get Fin to work on these help desks. Of course, there was work to be done there, but there's no reason why Fin couldn't sit on top of Zendesk and Fin couldn't sit on top of Salesforce. And like, why let all of these new challengers scoop up those customers? Like, we want to play in that space too. And so I think it's like for us is we were already sitting in this interesting space in the customer support category. We had this really good solution in Fin, and we knew it could work on top of these other help desks. So like, why not? Now, what I think's actually been really interesting and what I would say has surprised us internally is I think like the intention of this was probably for Fin to be this independent agent that could sit everywhere. More and more, as we're actually selling this solution to the market, we're finding that customers want both. Like they might start wanting Fin, they end up as Intercom platform customers, and they're still interested in the help desk. And so I think maybe something that we weren't anticipating is that like the emergence of this new technology and these new agent solutions it's almost like an impetus for customers and the market to actually start considering, okay, maybe this is the time now then I need to switch my help desk product. Or it's like finally pushing them over the edge if maybe they've been thinking about it for a while, which is great for us. But yeah, I think that's been something that we didn't necessarily anticipate it going that way.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That maybe it started with one, maybe the second route, but it ended up unexpectedly channeling into the first route as well. I'm curious if the kind of switching cost that you mentioned for help desks also applies for knowledge. Like I imagine that even people who might be Intercom platform customers, like
Yeah.
not all of their knowledge or a central wiki for what people are or how to respond to certain issues or just the company knowledge in general doesn't all live inside of the Intercom knowledge base. Did you also have to think about connectors and importing content from every kind of document-based tool and other knowledge-based product?
Before we started sitting, let's say, Fin on top of other help desks, like you're completely right, knowledge exists everywhere. And so even from the start, we were building different ways to like ingest content from all different sources, like even including your website. So as that updates, Fin has access to that. So that and like content management, it's a never-ending job. And even as some of our most successful customers who have been with us now for over 2 years, who have like really good resolution rates, they're still updating their content. Like our own Intercom team, like we've got people, that is their job to make sure that the knowledge base is ever evolving as the product evolves. So yeah, that's definitely something that is like it has a consistent place on our roadmap.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the agent can't just guess in many scenarios. Like it has to be grounded in like the most recent up-to-date content. So that continues to be super
Yep.
important, even with AI generated resolutions. Speaking of resolutions, I think something interesting that Fin did pretty early on as well is introduce a kind of a new pricing model that was strictly based on resolutions, which was, I think, very bold in one way because it's very aligned with the outcomes that people want to see out of the product. Like you only pay when the AI actually resolves an issue end to end. So I'm curious, a lot of AI companies aren't doing that. Like I think it's very common now to basically pay for generation. What was the thinking behind that? I imagine it's more aligned with customer value, but curious if there are other factors. And also, how do you maintain that quality if in scaling that?
Yes, this was something that was very heavily debated. We did not just like automatically land on outcome-based pricing. So, like originally when we launched Fin, of course we explored maybe some more of the tried and tested true SaaS pricing models like seat or usage-based pricing. But to your point in bringing up value, like Fin and the value that it can provide to customers is fundamentally very different. This is not technology that is in support of humans doing their work. Like the whole point is that Fin does the work for your team. And so that forced us to rethink the pricing model to be much more aligned with value. So once we ruled out, let's say, seats, the other thing that we looked at was conversation-based pricing. And less about, we hadn't quite gotten to outcome, but maybe it's just, okay, if you involve Fin in 10,000 conversations per month, that's how we'll price accordingly. But I think what was interesting and being one of the first to market is in early 2023, when we first launched Fin, customers were hesitant with this technology, right? Like it was unproven to them at the time, these solutions. And so I think there was a lot of hesitancy in, okay, I'm not ready to pay for something when you have not proven to me that it will work and it'll work for me and my business at scale. So there was just a lack of trust in the agent's ability to effectively answer and resolve queries. And so I think for us, it was like we had the confidence that this was going to work and we needed to put our money where our mouth was at the time. And I think show customers and the market that we have skin in the game with you and that the risk wasn't just all on them. And that's when we really locked in on this idea of outcome-based pricing. And like you said, Ethan, we only charge a customer and we only get paid when Fin actually resolves a query, when Fin actually does the work that it's promising to do, which I think we've seen a lot of other players and other agents now move into that space or with that strategy. But yeah, I think it was scary, nerve-wracking, debated internally a lot when we first did this.
Yeah, super interesting to hear the internal discussions around that and what the considerations were involved. And I think it's also interesting because on the one hand, you could have one conversation, which the resolution is very short. Like maybe the customer just gets an immediate answer to the question, Fin considers it resolved, that's a resolution. But on the other hand, you could have this very long,
Yes.
thorny problem thread that Fin is trying to answer but can't really get to it at the very end. Yeah, I'm curious like how you see that in the future. If you continue, are you planning on continuing to make resolutions just a flat pricing model, or as Fin continues to answer more complex queries, does that start to come into consideration? Like what type of problem Fin is resolving?
To approach, I think, the boundaries of what this pricing model can like actually solve for. That is coming, it's manifesting in a few different ways. So there's one around, to your point, there's like level of effort for Fin and like how do we take that into account of what we price something. So as we've been building out Fin Voice, I think that's a really good example of the effort of a back and forth phone call and the cost of a phone call and an agent being or serving a customer via the phone. It's just the economics of that are completely different. The amount of time you're spending with the customer is different. And so we've had to figure out, okay, what does like resolution-based pricing look like for a really specific channel? But also something that's interesting now is Fin can resolve really complex queries and Fin can handle those really complex queries. Sometimes for a customer, they want Fin to follow a standard operating procedure, but the outcome that they're looking for is actually not a resolution. It's to do a bunch of upfront work. It's to do a bunch of triaging. And then ultimately, maybe one of the outcomes there is actually the query gets sent over to a really specific team with this beautiful package of information, like ready to go and hand over to a teammate. It's not a resolution, but it is the outcome that you wanted. So how do we factor that in? So that's something that we're currently grappling with right now. So it's ambiguous, like what the definition of what a resolution is will change depending on the context of the type of conversation. Yeah, so those are all things we're grappling with at the moment as Fin can do more and more.
I'm curious for those customers that have maybe a fully AI automated resolution not in their goals, like maybe that's not something they're looking for. Is that something that you push customers to see the edge of the future about? Do you want them to conceptualize Fin as something that can eventually not just pre-process your tickets or triage your tickets in a way that's more parsable by the team that it needs to end up with, but actually end-to-end automating things? Is that some customer education that you're having to do, or is that something you feel like generally the market is just not ready for
I would
yet?
say if you were asking me that question a year and a half ago, maybe even a year ago, yeah, maybe we would have customers of the market that wasn't ready. I would say we are finding more and more as customers with Fin and just with other agentic tools that they're using, like in work, outside of work. I think everyone is starting to see what's actually possible here. And we typically will get customers started with, don't worry about your complex stuff first. If you're ready for that, great, we will help you. Let's get you resolving your informational queries. Let's get you primed up and set up to do that. Let's show you what's possible there. And I think that's where we really help customers build confidence in, one, the technology, but two, like their own setups and their own teams and let them adapt to how things are changing. But I do think your point around setting a vision and having a vision and communicating that consistently to customers is really important. And I think you see a lot of that come through in the way that like Intercom does, Fin does a lot of, we put out the blueprint, for example. That is something that we paint the vision of 100% automation. Do I personally think every single customer support query or customer question that ever comes in for any business will 100% of the time be resolved with AI? No, but I also don't know if we want that. And every business might not want that. But I think it's important to paint that is the future if you want it. And the technology continues to get better and better. And shooting for 90% just doesn't sound as exciting either. Like you do have to paint, I think, a vision to get customers in the market moving in that direction.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I'm curious, like maybe there's like kind of two questions to follow on to that. One, was there like a personal part over the last year and a half where you maybe had an experience with an AI tool where you're like seeing what it's capable of and you realized that full automation could be possible in the future? Yeah. Or maybe you were working with Fin and then you were like, clearly this is much more capable than I had initially thought and we could get to a point of automated resolutions.
from my own personal experience as a PM working with these tools. So I'll go back and say that we're lucky, or I'm lucky, to be at a company who takes AI first really seriously. And so a few months ago, Dara, our CTO, came out with this whole thing around 2x, that every single person in R&D, not just engineering, but every function needs to be looking to use AI in their daily work lives to 2x their output, right? And figure out what that means to you. But we are going to give you access to any tool you want, or any tool that you want, and you are going to change the way that you work. And so I think we've had people who've really taken this to heart. And so for me, things that I never thought that I would be doing is, I don't know, coding changes and pushing them locally to my computer and actually creating pages. That for me, and I know that probably sounds silly, but that is a part of product management that I never really grappled with, or I never really broached that. And for me to be able to have a conversation with Claude Code in my terminal, never thought I'd see that day. That's happening. So I think I can see it personally in my own day-to-day life as a PM and that changing. But even earlier this year, I worked on that Fin Flywheel that I mentioned earlier. I worked on the analyze part of that with a team who built out all of these different insights and optimization tools for Fin. And one of the things that really wowed me, certainly, was the idea that the technology has gotten so good and the Fin system has gotten so powerful that we can via pattern matching figure out where are the really common, let's say, pockets of conversations where Fin maybe has access to content that could answer these, but your content actually needs, your knowledge base actually needs this extra paragraph injected. And if you were to just inject that diff in, next time Fin encounters that conversation, Fin will be able to resolve it. And so we're actually suggesting line by line changes in our customers' knowledge base. And the output of that is good. The product is actually really good. And of course we had to iterate our way to that level of quality, but I'm damn, that is really doing someone's job for them, or really helping them. The amount of time and effort and that has saved knowledge managers, I just think is crazy. So yeah, I think that's probably within the product for me in the last couple of months, that's one that's really stood out to me.
That's super interesting.
Exactly.
When Fin can almost learn from different interactions and proactively suggest things. That's pretty cool. And I'm curious, does that moment also have to happen for customers who are hesitant to adopt the technology? When they think about 100% AI resolution, or even 90%, what do you find helps drive that conviction for them? Or does that just need to happen by seeing the product and implementing it themselves?
Some of the features that we've shipped recently are just even when a customer's first getting started with Fin or in a POC, once you actually see Fin live handling these conversations, or once you actually see all of the edits that Fin would suggest to your knowledge base, or when I'll bring up another feature where we've recently built something called the customer experience score, the CX score, and how Fin is able to go through and analyze and identify all the drivers of poor customer experience and show those to you at scale with all of the underlying conversations. Customers need to see that. And when they see it with their own data, that is when it clicks. Something that we started to do at a lot of our events is we set up something called Fin Labs. And so anyone who's at the event can actually go upstairs, sit down with someone from Intercom, pull up their account, and then we will show them all of the features that we've recently released, again, with their own data pre-populated. And that is when the moment, I think, things really click for them. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying I think that customers need to see the product in real time, in action, in their workspace with their own data, and that's when it's okay, this is something here.
Yeah, I can see that in context, in your own workspace would make a lot of sense. If I see this landing page and it's some abstract Fin talking to some example customer, I don't know how that applies to me, or maybe I think that's so far removed from what I'm already doing that could never work for me. But seeing that against my own conversations, against my own knowledge base, that's powerful.
In this world of AI, it's really easy to fake things. And I feel something that our leadership team definitely takes really seriously, and everyone here does, but it is preached from the top, is that we're not going to demo vaporware. So when we had Pioneer a few weeks ago, and our chief product officer, Paul Adams, was up on stage talking about Fin Voice, he used his cell phone, he called a real phone number and talked to Fin in real time. It was not Now, the entire room of 1,000 people is like everyone holding their breath because it's like, what's going to happen? But it's one of those things where I think it's really important in this new space that we're in that you have to appear and be credible. And I think putting the product front and center is how you do that.
Yes, 100%. And I think Intercom Fin has done a great job of that, not just providing promises, but actually delivering on an agent that fulfills those promises. A last question for you, and this is a big one too. I saw that Intercom has invested pretty heavily in building its own models instead of entirely relying on third-party LLMs. Like I saw that there's an AI research team that's actually building like a retrieval model in-house, which is really impressive. On the other hand, so one has to think, one, that's a lot of time and maybe not even specifically in the domain of a support agent. Like that's way deeper in the stack. So how did you guys come to that decision to build an in-house team, to develop that, to build in-house models? And what is your long-term view of the ROI on owning that of the stack?
Maybe I'll start with explaining that, like when we talk about Fin, there's 3 layers to Fin. So there is the app layer, or like the software layer. That is where our own customers can set up orchestration for Fin and create guidance and manage content. So that's like the app layer. Below that, you have the AI layer. So think of that as like the RAG system that ensures Fin is delivering really high quality answers. And then underneath that, we have the model layer. So that is what houses all of the underlying LLMs that the RAG system uses and makes multiple calls to. So why invest in our own model layer there? I will say, maybe naively, but I don't believe that every company in every category or every industry needs to be building out their own models in order to be successful. But for us, we think it's the right call because ultimately we believe that whoever wins this category, you need to have the best performing agent. And when we think about performance, like in the most simplest terms, I'm talking really about resolution rate. Resolution rate is the metric that tells you, is Fin successfully doing the work for you as a customer? And is it providing your customers with the best customer experience? And so I think what we've found is we launched Fin back in May of 2023. Fin launched with an average resolution rate of 23%, right? So Fin was handling those like informational FAQ type conversations. By the end of year 1, we were at like 45%. By the end of year 2, we're at 57. Now Fin is resolving on average, like for most customers, about 66% of conversations. And so like those first resolution rate increases, those could be linked to helping customers strengthen their content or building that flywheel that I talked about, opening up Fin to more channels. But I think like where we've gotten to now is that to continue to eke out every last, let's say, percentage point increase in resolution, you need to be able to fine tune all of the underlying systems and models and all of the handoffs of this complex system. And then in order to do that and eke out every little percentage point increase and do that fine tuning, you need to actually own every layer of that system. And so that's where we need to have the control to be able to do that, because we believe that is what's going to give us the best performing agent. And that's what we think is needed to actually win the category. So to your point, we've built out a few different models. And so like we have a summarization model. So Fin can take the back and forth query that the end user has sent in. It can contextualize that, make a little summary, and that's what gets fed across the rest of the sort of AI engine. We've got an escalation model that knows or is fine-tuned to detect like really specific instances when Fin should go ahead and escalate to a human. And so in being able to do that, we can like fine tune and do all of our own tests to make sure that like they are operating with like optimal performance. And then when you think about, okay, that is what we did, but I also feel like we were in a very unique position to be able to do this that I don't think, or at least in our space, like many, let's say competitors or just like companies, products were able to do. Something that I think is important to know is that we've had this AI skill set in the business for quite a long time. Fergal, who is our chief AI officer, he's been at Intercom for 8.5 years, which I think is fairly unique. We've been building out this team for many years too. So we've had a team that shipped ML products in the past, like article recommendation engines, or of course, like resolution bot. But we've also been, this kind of goes back to the incumbent versus challengers dynamic in the market right now, but We've also been in the business of customer service for a long time. Intercom is 14 years old. I think that there's a lot of institutional domain knowledge like within the halls of Intercom and certainly within the R&D org. So we understand the jobs of customer support really well. And I think you need that like really deep understanding of the jobs in order to even understand what are all of the different models that need to be created and like what are the puzzle pieces needed to put this like reasoning engine together. And I think actually the thing that's probably the most important that allows us to do this is that we've got thousands of customers using Fin. And because of that means that we've got millions of conversations. And then that's actually the thing that we can use to then train and build these models. And so, I mean, that actually really the scale at which we've got usage for Fin is really the thing that actually unlocks all of this.
Yeah, that's huge. And yeah, that's super interesting that as a part of owning your own outcomes or owning the destiny of Fin, you have to be deeper and deeper in the stack. And yeah, like you said, it might not make sense for every type of company, especially if you're still trying to cross that initial jump in resolution rate that could be possible from a number of other far less capital intensive ways to improve your agent for that last
100%.
percent, which could be the differentiating factor. That makes a ton of sense. Awesome. Christine, thank you so much for sharing just about how you're thinking about building Fin and how you guys have come to some of these decisions and strategies. Really appreciate it. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube to get all the latest episodes. And to view our past episodes, visit us at useparagon.com/futureproof.